There were two seismic events this week. First, the death of Theresa May's deal. Second, it became clear that Parliament is now at war with the people it governs. Never has there been a more shameless, undemocratic, unprincipled bunch of shysters in Parliament. Politicians who piously bang on about the national interest while doing everything in their power to damage it. Divisions over Brexit have spewed up an arrogant political class, totally insulated from the lives of the people they represent. MPs who believe their vote and their views matter more than ours. They've forgotten what democracy means and associate it with their own power, not ours, as demonstrated by Dominic Grieve and his cabal of arrogant Remainers, who are now preparing to tear up the parliamentary rule book to seize control of Brexit. I'm glad you think it's funny. These saboteurs are arrogant enough to believe the power we afforded them allows them to silence our voice, trash our vote, and render the government powerless. So it's not just Brexit on the line here. It's democracy together with our whole political system. And if they fail, anarchy will follow.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
You're laughing. It's not funny to the 17.4 million who voted to leave.
I'd rather laugh than cry, and I love you, Carole. And so I'd rather laugh than get angry at you, because what you said, I don't agree with much of what you just said.
I'm sure you don't.
I'll explain why I don't agree. Parliamentary sovereignty and the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, which was the fundamental pillar of the Brexit campaign, that very doctrine, parliamentary sovereignty, teaches us in constitutional law, which Dominic Grieve, by the way, he understands the law. You mentioned him, this is why I refer to him. And that is that Parliament can do what it wants, and no past Parliament can bind a future Parliament. This is a fundamental pillar of our Constitution.
And he's trying to tear up the rules of it.
And Parliament can legislate to govern itself over its own rules as well. Parliament can pretty much do what it wants in this country. That is the democracy.
And you think that's a good thing?
No, let me continue with that. We also, beyond that point, have a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. And as a result, it means that our MPs can lead their constituency for 5 years and then go back to their constituents to ask for a verdict on how they performed. They are not obliged to adhere to even the majority opinion in their constituency.
Well, let me
and the last point I'll make in response to you, and that is that, that we have the referendum itself that Parliament legislated for and approved, legally was advisory. And the reason I mention that, not that you don't have a moral high ground.
We were never told that.
You won.
No.
You won the vote. The only reason I mentioned that it was legally advisory is to touch on what I, with respect, consider a tad hyperbolic, that this would be anarchy and the end of democracy.
It would be.
Because if the referendum was only advisory, then it's not the end of democracy if it isn't adhered to, though, of course, morally it should be adhered to. So I make all of those points just to say, I think let me
answer one of your points
and the rhetoric a bit.
You're talking about parliamentary
There will not be civil war and there will not be anarchy.
OK, let me answer you then.
This country is stronger than that.
OK, so in the last election, before the last election in 2017, more than 80% of our politicians made a solemn vow to implement and honour the result of the referendum. Many of them were re-elected on that very premise. And so the minute they get re-elected, they change their mind. And now they're trying to overturn 100 years of history in Parliament to achieve what they want. They're trying to change the rules to suit their agenda. And whereas, I'm going to come to you, Greg, whereas, you know, they've pretended this is in the national interest and it's about parliamentary sovereignty. It's naked now. All they want to do is whatever it takes to stop Brexit.
I think the argument that's gone wrong in this whole thing is people keep saying they're looking after their own interests. I don't think they are. No. I think the vast majority of them are looking at what they find and saying, yeah, we should do this or we shouldn't do this. And I think they're taking quite a principled position. The problem is that there's amongst those who want to leave, there are two distinct groups. There's one group who want to leave under World Trade Organization terms and just get out, and there's another lot saying you can't do that. Unless you've got a deal, this is an economic disaster for this country. And they're not going to agree, those two. And therefore, almost anything you look at, there's no majority for because of that.
But I fear for the... Sorry, you go.
Well, what I was going to say is I think your points are fascinating and probably absolutely right and all the rest of it, but they're very technical points. So what you're doing is you're saying representative democracy versus direct democracy. You're saying about, oh, yeah, this was advisory, but not legally obligated to implement.
Points. Yeah,
so, so they're very technical points. But I would say that the man on the streets, he's not sitting
He's not
there
gonna
going...
feel that.
Yeah,
You're
he's
right.
not sitting
Yeah.
there, oh, direct
That's right.
versus representative.
Yeah.
He's not. He's just saying, listen, we had a vote to leave.
Yeah.
And whatever you say about advisory, it said in black and white on that little leaflet that we all got, that it said black and white, the government will implement what you decide. It did say that.
That's right.
So to the man on the street, they can read and they understand that and they voted. And they don't get into what you're saying about the specifics. I feel that those people that voted Brexit feel incredibly let down. And this has become a game-playing, personal, political, opportunistic thing instead of actually implementing what people ask for. So whether or not there will be anarchy in the streets, I'm not sure. But what you certainly will end up with as a result... Let me make my final point. I still believe that many politicians do not understand why people voted leave. They think people voted leave because they were stupid, because of a side of a bus, because of Russian interference or because of Facebook. So what I'm saying is they don't understand why people voted leave. They have ignored those consents because most of the time they don't even understand them, and they will just go off and do what they want.
What I find extraordinary is there are 650 MPs to whom we pay a minimum of £77,700 per annum. A minimum. They get more as they progress up the ladder, and they have been unable to resolve this. They asked us to give them a decision. We gave them a decision. They failed to implement that. To keep the numbers going, that is because the current constitution of the House of Commons is around 67% Remain. I find it personally sickening, although I think you've gone a little bit over the top with Mr Grieve, and I think you perhaps painted him in too good a colour, but I find it extraordinary that a man who actually represents a Leave constituency, all by 0.7%, but it's still a Leave, would seem to be the prime architect in denying Leave. The bottom line is this. I don't want to do it again. If you do it again, do you honestly think the British equivalent of the Rust Belt, do you think their lives have improved in the last 2.5 years? No. They are still watching this programme in Blackburn and in Sunderland and in Leeds. In fact, they're probably even worse bloody off than they were 2.5 years ago. All you will do is heap more division. Who should decide it? We're sort of debating in this one. Who should decide it? The people we pay an absolute fortune to, and they should have their heads banged together and find a compromise.
But it is interesting that you just mentioned the Grieve leads
albeit marginally.
Yeah, no, but all the main Remainers, all these rebels, all of them represent Leave constituents. And you say that, you know, there's not going to be anarchy. If these MPs, together with Bercow, succeed and the government can no longer independently manage the business of Parliament, then Parliament will fall, and we will have, and there will be chaos.
Sorry, because I've been waiting.
Yeah, he has.
Government doesn't need... It's not the job of government to manage Parliament. It's
the
job of Parliament to manage...
the business of Parliament.
It's not the job of government to manage Parliament. It's the job of Parliament to manage government. It's the other way around. That's what parliamentary sovereignty means. I do agree with what Michelle said, that actually it's about feelings and people feel betrayed, which is why I said you have the moral high ground, and my points are technical. But the reason I don't think there will be unrest and anarchy and civil war or anything like that is we've been here before. We were incredibly let down when Tony Blair invaded Iraq as a country. But it didn't lead to, apart from terrorists who are now in jail, it didn't lead to the breakdown of our democracy. We've been here before. Feelings are strong across the board, but I believe our country's stronger than to break apart over this dispute.
Let me show a clip from John Bercow, because I think John Bercow got it right. His job is to defend democracy, not to defend the executive.
I have no intention of taking lectures on doing right by Parliament from people who have been conspicuous in denial of and sometimes contempt for it. I will stand up for the rights of the House of Commons, and I will not be pushed around by agents of the executive branch.
I mean, that's why, of course, there's a whole chunk of the Conservative Party who are in government who hate him, because he's the first speaker, certainly that I can remember, who's actually stood up and said, look, this is a democracy and you all get a vote.
We've discussed this before, but he did define legal advice. He did freelance it.
Well, he
said he will continue to do so.
No, and he says precedent.
Don't worry.
He said precedent has to be changed, set as you go through.